Imagine the horror of sailing into battle, not knowing what waits just beneath the murky surface of the water. This was ancient China, where engineers turned rivers into killing fields with forgotten weapons of terrifying genius. For over 1,000 years, while empires in the West fought on land and open sea, Chinese masterminds waged war on a third, more complex domain, the intricate network of inland waterways that were the lifeblood of the nation. Here, on the Yangtze, the Yellow River, and vast lakes, conflict demanded a different kind of thinking. The weapons born from this need were not just tools of destruction, but instruments of psychological domination designed to turn the water itself, the essential highway, into a multi-layered three-dimensional trap. We are about to uncover 4 of these devastating naval war machines, whose legacy is written not on parchment, but in the splintered wood and ash of conquered fleets. Our journey begins not on the deck of a ship, but in the silent depths below. The most insidious weapon in the ancient Chinese arsenal was the caltrop spiked raft known as the Tijiao Li Fif. Picture a deceptively simple platform of rough timber lashed together, but its surface is a forest of iron. Dozens of foot-long spikes, each forged with cruel backward-facing barbs, are fixed to point upward like the teeth of a submerged predator. The terrifying genius was in its deployment and its invisibility. These were not attack crafts manned by crews. They were autonomous agents of chaos. Before a battle, hundreds would be assembled upstream from the enemy's position. Under cover of night or amidst the distraction of opening skirmishes, they were quietly released to drift with the current. Critically, they were ballasted to float not on the surface, but just below it, leaving only the very tips of their spikes breaking the waterline, a nearly invisible threat to a helmsman looking ahead. The physics of the attack were brutally simple. An approaching warship, its hull made of thick pine or oak, provided all the necessary force. As the vessel drove forward, it would ride directly onto the submerged raft. The ship's own momentum would drive the barbed spikes deep into its wooden belly. The barbs made withdrawal impossible. Pulling away would only tear the hull apart further. Sometimes, the buoyancy of the raft would cause it to ride funny by the side of the ship as it collided, ripping a catastrophic long gash along the vessel's most vulnerable point. Within minutes, cold river water would flood the hold. The sounds were specific and horrifying. The initial, sickening crack of wood, the terrible screech of iron on timber, and then the roar of inrushing water. This was the ancient world's underwater minefield, a cheap, mass-producible area, denial weapon. A single well-placed spike raft could doom a large ship, and a swarm of them could cripple an entire fleet's advance before a single arrow was fired. The psychological warfare was profound. It forced every commander to fear the river itself, to see the open water not as a clear path, but as a potential graveyard littered with silent, drifting jaws. To dominate these treacherous waterways, you needed more than a ship. You needed a moving piece of sovereign territory. This brings us to the ultimate symbol of naval power projection, the multi-storied assault tower ship, the ship Tushon. Think of it as the ancient world's aircraft carrier. This was a vessel that redefined scale, a floating fortress constructed from colossal timbers that could rise 3, 4, even 5 decks high. It wasn't just built for the water, it was engineered to conquer from it. The logistics of its construction were a massive undertaking, often requiring the resources of a central imperial authority. The lower decks housed the engine room of the ancient world, banks of oarsmen, sometimes numbering in the hundreds, whose synchronized strokes powered this behemoth against the current. The middle levels served as armories, barracks, and storage, but the true power resided above. The upper decks were vast open-air fighting platforms. They were packed with companies of archers and crossbowmen, giving them a commanding field of fire that could rain death on smaller ships and riverbanks alike. Some variants mounted traction trebuchets, stone-throwing engines powered by crews pulling on ropes, or giant crossbows called fiddy-bed crossbows, fiddy-dita crossbows, turning the tower ship into a mobile artillery battery. The most intimidating feature, however, was the retractable boarding bridge. These were heavy wooden gangways, armored and spiked, that could be lowered like a drawbridge directly onto the deck of a lower enemy ship, or even onto the battlements of a riverside city wall. This allowed soldiers to swarm across in formation, turning a naval engagement into an infantry assault. The primary tactical use was siege warfare. China's great rivers were the superhighways of the ancient world. A fleet of tower ships could sail deep into enemy territory, bypassing fortified mountain passes and walled land routes. They could anchor off a city like a floating castle and unleash a sustained bombardment from a height that matched the city walls. Historical records from the Han Dynasty and the Three Kingdoms period describe flagships so vast and stable they could carry over 1,000 troops and even have stables for cavalry horses. They didn't just fight Wandan, the water. They projected the full, crushing administrative and military power of an empire along the water, making rivers the decisive avenue for conquest. For sheer elemental terror, no weapon matched the nightmare of fire on the water. This was the domain of the dragonhead flamethrower, barge, the Hushilijan Chushufun. This vessel was ancient chemical warfare made manifest, a tool designed to break not just ships, but the spirit of the men who sailed them. The barge itself was a specialized, sturdy craft, often reinforced with clay bricks or iron plates to protect its deadly cargo from enemy missiles. Mounted on pivoting turntables were one or more bronze dragon heads, intricately cast with gaping maws. These were not ornaments. They were sophisticated hydraulic projectors. Inside the hull, a protected crew operated a complex system of double-action piston pumps and giant bellows. These were connected to sealed ceramic tanks containing a horrific gelatinous incendiary mixture, a primitive form of Greek fire known in China as fierce fire oil or menghuo. This substance, likely based on distilled petroleum, thickened with resins and chemicals like saltpeter, was the key. It was sticky, dense, and burned at an extraordinarily high temperature. When the crew engaged the pump system, this liquid hell was forced under pressure through leather hoses lining the dragon's neck and out its mouth. A crewman with a torch would ignite the stream as it launched. The result was not a simple flame, but a continuous roaring jet of liquid fire that could arc over 50 feet across the water's surface. The mixture was designed to cling to whatever it touched. Wooden hulls would be instantly engulfed. Hemp sails became sheets of flame, and the water itself could seem to burn. The tactical deployment was devastating. These fire barges would be maneuvered upwind, creating advancing walls of flame that broke enemy formations and spread uncontrollable panic. The psychological impact was carefully calculated. In Chinese cosmology, the dragon was a symbol of imperial power, water, and transformative force. To see a metallic, engineered dragon spewing continuous, unstoppable fire from the waves was a profound psychological attack. It weaponized mythology. The dragonhead barge transformed the chaotic element of fire into a precise, directed instrument of naval dominance, capable of erasing an enemy's will to fight along with his fleet. As colossal tower ships and fiery barges dominated the battle space, a clever and brutal counter-strategy became common: immobilization. Why duel a giant when you can trap it? Fleets began using massive multi-pronged iron grappling hooks, launched by catapults or swung by hand, to snare the higher decks of tower ships. They also used heavy iron chains stretched between smaller boats to entangle hulls and rudders, creating a tangled web to halt an advance. The response to this tactic was a vessel of surgical precision, the grappling hook and chain breaker ship, the Zhu Lian Pu Lian Chun. This was the ancient equivalent of a naval special operations craft, built for one high-risk, high-reward mission. It was all function over form, low to the water, sleek, and incredibly maneuverable. It relied on a small elite crew and a bank of oars for rapid darting acceleration, not for sustained cruising. Its prow was often reinforced with an iron ram for punching through light obstacles. But its defining features were the mechanical devices mounted amidships. Some designs featured rotating arms tipped with scythe-like blades, turned by a crewman cranking a treadle. Others used heavy guillotine-style cutters, raised and dropped with pulleys and counterweights. The mission profile was exceptionally dangerous. As the main fleets clashed, these small, fast cutters would dart into the chaotic thick of the battle. Their goal was to evade the giants and slide alongside a tower ship that had been immobilized by grapples or anchored to hold position. With precise passes, the whirling blades or dropping cutters would sever the thick, tarred hemp ropes of the grappling hooks. Their primary target, however, was the anchor chain, the heavy iron links that provided a ship's stability in a current. Severing these chains created instant, catastrophic chaos. A tower ship suddenly cut loose from its anchors would become an uncontrollable driftwood giant, spinning in the current and vulnerable to ramming or fire. Its own boarding bridges might become hazards, swinging wildly. This vessel carried no heavy projectile weapons. Its power was in negation, in undoing the enemy's work. It was a scalpel in a battlefield of hammers, proving that on the dynamic river battlefield, speed, timing, and technical ingenuity could dismantle even the most imposing displays of raw power. Together, these four weapons formed a complete and terrifying military ecosystem, a symphony of engineering and psychological warfare played out on a liquid stage. The caltrop spiked raft controlled the unseen depth, turning the riverbed's approach into a zone of dread. The multi-storied tower ship commanded the visible height, projecting imperial authority and turning rivers into highways for siege. The dragon-head flamethrower barge dominated the horizontal plane with pure elemental terror, weaponizing fire and mythology. And the grappling hook and chainbreaker ship operated in the nimble spaces in between, the swift counterpoint that could undo the work of the others. This was not simplistic naval combat. It was a complex three-dimensional chess game where control of China's vital arteries decided the fate of dynasties. These inventions showcase a forgotten zenith of ancient military technology, where water was not a barrier, but a canvas for some of history's most brutal and brilliant ingenuity. They mastered the river, and in doing so, they mastered the empire. But the story of ancient warfare is endless. What happened when these riverine titans met the open ocean, and what secret siege engines could shatter the mightiest fortress walls? To uncover the next chapter of forgotten military history, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. We're just getting started.